WOZ Up with Bill. Conversations on life, faith, and everything in between.
Good day and welcome to What's Up with Bill. We're looking forward to having a number of opportunities to talk to you via this podcast. What Frank and I are going to talk about today, it's kind of a follow-up to the first podcast I did with Pastor Ben when we talked about loneliness. So today it's a kind of a natural outgrowth of that. We're going to talk about building relationships, friendships that last a lifetime. So I want to welcome my good friend Frank Guinta. You know, my background's Pentecostal. Frank's background is Baptist. But we've been friends for 53 years, Frank. Welcome.
You know, Bill, it's an absolute joy to be here with you and to talk about 50 years of life-giving friendship. It's going to be a great conversation.
Frank and I were just doing some reminiscing in preparation for this and going back and realized that actually we met when I came way back in the fall of 1973. It would be Thanksgiving. I started working under Pastor Rutledge at Faith, then Tabernacle. And Frank, you were?
At that particular period in time, I was just entering into my second year of being youth pastor at First Baptist Church in Dartmouth on Occoloney Street with the good old Dr. Richard Coffin.
Yeah. And we were blessed, Frank, because we had, they weren't perfect, but they were good men to work under, to be mentored. It was a real gift.
Well, it was one of those things where you learned early in life that you can't do ministry alone. You have to do ministry with somebody, and it's in that somebody relationship that allows you to develop unbelievable skills to be the person God wants you to be in those environments.
So Frank, we want to talk about, so that's about 52, 53 years if my math is okay, but we want to talk about building heartfelt connections, finding and cultivating relationships that last a lifetime. And it's always important, but it becomes even more important as people age and become seniors. But this is not just principles for people who are seniors. These principles will work at any time. So let's dive into this, Frank. I'm just going to touch on this scripture verse here. It comes out of Proverbs. It says this: a man who has friends must himself be friendly. There's a friend who sticks closer than a brother. So, Frank, everybody wants a friendship, I think, that lasts a lifetime. But how do you go about finding those and begin to cultivate it?
Well, if I'm going to think about the friendship development process in relationship to what's happened with you and me and dig out principles out of our experience, I think the first thing is that we identified with each other because we were doing the same thing. You were a youth pastor, I know, in a Pentecostal environment, and I was doing youth ministry in a Baptist environment, but the point is we were doing youth ministry. We were doing something that was in common, so we had something to talk about in that regard, and I think that became maybe a bit of the foundation upon which we were going to build things.
And the other thing, Frank, is that's absolutely the truth, and I know that our pastor invited you to help with doing some things pulpit-wise during those years. And I think that as I look back, one of the things we've both talked about and come to realize is that friendships get built not by the grand moments in life. It's a compilation of smaller things that happen. Right, Frank?
I think that's right. Well, of course, in our case, our wives were having babies at the same time. And so there was a commonality between your wife and my wife in that regard. The other is that we weren't afraid of the simplicity of things. Your Cindy didn't have to roast the beef to get us to have a message. We couldn't afford that, and so what we did is we met together and we ate craft dinner together. I mean, we were willing to do the simple things that make friendship last. The conversation was more important than the food.
You're absolutely right, Frank. I'm smiling as you say that because there's an old song that sings precious memories, how they linger. And I'm thinking back to how many Sunday nights after service we got together at your house or my house. And I'll tell you one thing, we were major supporters of craft dinner. Now, this is not a free advertisement, but that's what we had. And it shouldn't work, but it did because the point was being together.
It was being together. But when we were spending time together, there were significant things that were happening in our lives that precipitated us responding to the kinds of needs. So if it was a ministry thing that we wanted to share, you were not afraid to ask me to be a part of. I was not afraid to ask you to be a part of. And we did what was required. But the thing wasn't the issue. It was the fact that we cared for each other and that we were in those spots to help. So we shared our resources, but the resources were shared because we cared for each other.
And people always think that friendships sometimes are built on being able to share the mountaintops. But as I think back now, Frank, I know that you talked about children coming along. You and Donna had to walk through some challenges with your son, Jonathan.
Yes, well, Jonathan was born deaf. And what I remember back then is I was beginning to worry about the fact that he couldn't hear the sound of a bird, or he would never hear what the tone of a piano sounded like. I mean, your wife Cindy played the piano so beautifully. I would have loved Jonathan to be able to experience that. But, the fact is that you shared and walked with us during that experience. But what helped to make it common, you had your own challenges that we had to walk with.
Yeah, and that was when we had Rachel, our middle daughter, and discovered when she was about 4 or 5 that she had growth hormone deficiency, and that launched us into a whole, like a journey. And thankfully things went well, but at the same time, you and Donna were there to support us, and probably understanding with what you went through with Jonathan. But, at the moment, you don't necessarily think you're applying and focusing on the present. But going back now, you realize that sharing those valley moments were incredibly important to building a lasting friendship.
That's right. And so I mean, when you think of the metaphor of the valley and the mountain, you climb the mountain and it gives you the big view of things. But it's down in the valley where the garden is growing.
Yeah.
And, the roots are growing deep. And so when we were going through the tough times in family life, we were walking together with that. We were willing to pay the price to be together in those tough times. We didn't do them alone. And so as a result of that, our children have grown up to be healthy people and successful people in life. But I think it's because we followed the principle that we are together at all costs.
And that's, and I think back, Frank, I'm having a wee bit of a chuckle because that's really the gift of a true friend. Because there have been times in my life, in the moment when I was going through things, where I can look back and say this now. In the moment, it necessarily wasn't the most happy thing, is that, Frank, you were willing to care for me enough to challenge me on some things and saying, you might be a little off base here, but I'm not doing this because I want to destroy you. I'm just saying, you're heading for the rocks. You need to put the brakes on, and we're going to stop, and we're going to stay, and we're going to work with you. And that's the other part of friendship, is that it just can't be about. And it is. There's lots of wonderful moments, right? But a true friend will be with you through adversity.
Well, I mean, I think that there were biblical illustrations of that too. If we follow Jesus in terms of developing friendship, you take a look at how Jesus developed a relationship with his good apostle Peter. He always had his foot in his mouth most of the time, but Jesus was willing to say to Peter, "Do this, and something will happen."
Yeah.
Like throw the net on the other side of the boat, and you might get some fish. And Jesus walked with him. Well, I think that the principle there is that we look at each other and we say, we don't always have the right answer. But my friend is helping me to be on the right path to get the answer. And I've always found that you were willing to be straight with me about things that might have gone off the path. I was willing to do that with you. Yeah. And the outcome of that was not only that the project most probably ended up being better, but our friendship became deeper because we were sharing in the tough things in life.
Frank, we were talking about this in preparation, about friendships, about how to ascertain what's happening in a relationship. And I know with your work, I came to Halifax in the fall of '73. And what's interesting is that I had I had no idea that it would become a lifetime call. And then basically I've spent the rest, I grew up in the West. I came here, my wife's from the Toronto area. So we've been here since 73, but your ministry path has taken you. You've lived here, you've lived in Toronto, you've served in Edmonton, so you've been across. But our friendship really never waned, even though we were always not geographically together.
Well, because two things were in place. One is, whenever I came back for a visit, the very first people we were connecting with was with the Wozneys. We wanted to see them because they were attached to us at the hip in some ways. Our friendship was important enough that we made sure that you were part of the agenda of the holiday. That's one thing. I think the second thing is that we lived a particular scripture. I think of 1 Corinthians chapter 13, verses 4 to 8. Now, I'll just go through this quickly. It says this: if you love someone, you are loyal to them. If you love someone, you believe in them. If you love someone, you expect the best of them. If you love someone, and this is the kicker, you will stand your ground in defense of them even when they're wrong. And I think that's the foundation upon which distance was not the issue. The fact that we were together. And we were faithful. I mean, we had coffee with each other once a week at the same time, all the time, because we cared for each other.
And I know, Frank, we touched on this too. It's important to be able to sort of discern what the context of the relationship is. I know this, that the fact of the matter is, sometimes people have relationships where they always have to be the ones who are initiating, and the person who's receiving it enjoys it, but there's no reciprocation. You need to be able to really discern what the nature of that is. I know with our relationship, I'll call you out of the blue, and it'll happen in reverse. It's an even flow. It's an even flow back and forth. That's really important. We were talking earlier about the fact that as in the senior years, some seniors tell me they're very, very lonely, okay? So when they say that to me, like, I want to be honest. We want to be able to, I told Frank, I said, 75% of bold is made up of old. So we just tell the truth at this age. You know what I mean? Like, hopefully with some grace. But if somebody as a senior is telling me that they're lonely, to me, there's an amber light flashing.
Well, you see, I always like to say to people who tell me that, I says, do you have a telephone? Do you know how to press the buttons?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a matter of taking the initiative to make a contact, to be in touch. Now, when things are disturbing and I need to have a voice, I mean, I don't go into a corner and pine away wishing someone would call me and come and help. What I do is I get on the horn and I say, hey, look, if you got time to just have a talk, and guess what? On the other hand, I've never been disappointed. You've always said, Frank, I think we could do that. Now, I might not be able to do it right at the moment, but here's a time when we can get together, and guess what? We get together and the issues are solved. It's taking the initiative to be intentional about developing the relationship. Life-giving relationships are intentional relationships, and they're collaborative relationships.
Frank, we talked earlier, it comes out of 2 Corinthians chapter 9:6. Paul said this, I say, he who sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and he who sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. That principle applies to friendship. Sometimes we use it for giving and whatever. But when people tell me they're lonely, my question is, what have you sown into relationships? Because the crop you're getting, you're not happy with.
See, part of the difficulty is we live in an economically focused world. But what we need to stop and realize is that there are different kinds of currencies. And one of the most precious currencies, which happens to be non-reoccurring, is time. And good, long-lasting, life-giving relationships are contingent on our willingness to spend our time with each other. Sow time into the garden of relationships, and you will benefit by getting a whole lot more in terms of friendship development.
So, Frank, we're going to wrap this up soon, but so let's say somebody's out. We're not here to scold, okay? But we're talking about what we've learned. Some of this has happened almost without us knowing it's happened. But because we were sowing, you reap. So if somebody is in a situation where maybe they don't have friendships, it's never too late to start, is it?
No, I don't think it is too late to start ever. But I think what you need to keep in mind that there are 2 or 3 or 4 really essential principles that you can engage that make it possible for friendship to really develop for a long time. I think one of them, and I'll go back to it, is its intentionality.
Yeah.
You got to be intentional. The other is remember, it's collaborative. It's mutual sharing. You're going to do that. And then I think that it's important for us to keep in mind that a spiritual relationship, one which is common to both. We love the same Lord, and we have the same desire to encourage each other in the gospel. So what we do is we keep that in front of us and we share it with one another. I mean, look at you. We seldom are together, and we never leave without praying with each other. We never leave without embracing each other.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Frank, I want to thank you for joining us. And, we'll probably talk more. I mean, you can't exhaust a whole lifetime in 15 or 20 minutes. But I want to thank you. And so we end on this note, like if you're looking for a friendship, then you need to find places to connect with people. It's worth the effort. It's better than being alone. So I want to thank you for joining us today, Frank. Thank you so much. And the good Lord willing, we'll look forward to chatting again on the next issue of What's Up with Bill.